So our second speaker is a Portland-based sex surrogate, Carlene Ostedgaard. Yeah, give it up.
So hello everyone, and welcome to another special edition. Maybe they won't be so special in the future because I do want to start doing stuff like this regularly. But anyway, welcome to a special edition of Topless Topics. Regular viewers will know that a couple weeks ago I went to an event called Slutwalk Portland, which was a feminist protest on, don't tell me I deserve to be raped because I'm wearing a short skirt, that kind of stuff. Which, go watch the videos if you want to see more. And I also filmed the speakers there. And one of the speakers was this lovely lady next to me named Carlene Ostedgaard.
Yes.
And she is is it partner surrogate or surrogate partner?
Surrogate partner.
Surrogate partner. And I came with a list of questions that I was going to ask her, and I'm very eager to know more about this because it's not necessarily what you think. It's a actual... You have to get a certification for one thing, which, differentiates you from someone who just puts an ad on Craigslist and is like, oh, come here and I'll hug you. There's actual training and stuff involved. So if you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do, what some of the process of getting certified entails, what kind of training, and, how long you've been at it and what got you into it.
Okay. My name is Carlene Ostedgaard. I am a surrogate partner here in Oregon. I am one of two people that is a trained surrogate partner in the Pacific Northwest. The other one is a gay male in Seattle. But he may be moving down here, so I'm really excited about that, actually, to have somebody else here.
Take notes.
Exactly, yeah. He's not as active as I am in doing it. He's actually getting, and this happens a lot, which we can get back to, but quick aside, it's pretty common for us to also get therapy and counseling certifications, and go to school, and so you'll have your surrogate business and your therapy business. Mm-hmm. So he's actually doing that. So we might actually work together. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's me. And let's see. So surrogate partner therapy is a therapeutic process in which I work with a client and a therapist. And typically what happens...
What kind of therapist? Like a psychological therapist?
Yes, okay. Yes. So it's some kind of a psychotherapist or counselor. Generally, the referrals I get are from sex therapists or marriage and family counselors. Because that's generally where sexuality questions come up. And
what kind of training goes into certification?
Yes. So training there's a couple of different groups. There's one in Israel, and I don't actually know their name, but they're actually the second largest behind IPSA, which is based in Los Angeles. IPSA is the International Professional Surrogate Association. And I went down to Southern California for an intensive that was 2 weeks. I lived there. We all lived in the same house together. It was me and 5 other surrogate trainees. And, get up in the morning, we have breakfast, and then it's just training until we need to finish that night.
Seminar kind of training? Or?
It is both academic and experiential.
Okay.
So in the morning, oftentimes to ease us in, we would have lectures. Those lectures could be anything on, because we have to adhere to HIPAA. Mm-hmm. And so it could be about confidentiality or ethics, because we have a really, really stringent code of ethics.
You have to with something
exactly.
like this.
Precisely. Anything, with touch therapy, you really have to. And so you would start with that, and then usually she'd kind of ease you in. It was actually, I really appreciate the structure because it wasn't like, now we're going to do this very intimate thing at 9 a.m.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, that's got to be kind of, even if you mentally prepare yourself, it's still, which is a big part of what being a surrogate partner is
Absolutely.
Easing people into the physicality of it.
Precisely. And so you would always have even numbers, so you have a partner and the trainer actually
no third wheel.
Exactly. And she takes a few days to kind of figure out who she thinks are going to be good matches for each other. Mm-hmm. And then she hooks you up with your training partner. So in the afternoon we would do experiential things like the hand caress or the face caress.
And it's the same partner the whole...
Throughout the entire experience, yeah. Because it's kind of, basically the point is to emulate the relationship that you build with your client.
Yeah, and that's something I'm going to ask in a little bit too, is like how many sessions, what actually happens in the sessions. Before we started this interview, Carlene was nice enough to send me a couple of links, and one of them is this 20-odd minute interview with another surrogate partner. Blech, your tongue wants to say sex surrogate. Surrogate partner, which has a lot of the same information, but it's definitely a good watch. So if this isn't enough to satisfy you, then go ahead and check the description and I'll have a link there. But really quickly, how did you get into becoming a surrogate partner?
I learned about it on TLC's program Strange Sex, and they featured a surrogate partner.
Okay.
That was about 4 years ago now.
Oh, okay. So this is all fairly recent then.
Yeah, it's pretty recent. Yeah, I got trained, it'll be a year ago around Halloween. So it's pretty recent for sure.
I imagine that the whole idea of surrogate partners is pretty recent too, because
It's been around since the 60s.
Really?
So, yeah, Masters
Oh, okay.
and Johnson actually stumbled upon it. Are you aware of Masters and Johnson? Okay, so Masters and Johnson.
And even if I was, like, we want to...
That's okay, fair enough. I have to tell everybody. And I do not remember their first names right now. I'm sorry. It's
I'll
a brain
Google it.
fart. Okay.
You're on the internet. Google it.
Yeah, exactly. So they're sexologists. They were sexologists. I think they have both since passed away. They're probably one of the most revolutionary sexologists in the field. So Alfred Kinsey came along, and then they came along.
Kinsey, of course, of the Kinsey scale.
Yes, precisely. So they were that was in the 60s, and they actually started doing practical work to determine the sources of dysfunction, sexual dysfunction. Now that was their term, and that's why if you Google it, you will find them talking about dysfunction. In the therapeutic world, we're definitely moving away from that term.
Yeah.
But if you want to Google it, that's the way you're going to be able to find it.
What is the term now?
We use dissatisfaction.
Okay, that's a good word.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a personal, I want to change this.
Exactly. Because if you're not having sex at all and you're happy about it, that's normal. That's normal for you. If you're not ejaculating and you're happy about it, that's normal. If you have sex once a month and you're happy about it and your partner's happy about it,
Yeah,
all those things are normal.
I don't know how many of my viewers are aware of this, because I actually haven't talked about it so much, but up until I got married, I was pretty much 90% sure I was asexual. I had no attraction to anyone. I had no desire to have sex. I was actually repulsed by people wanting to have sex with me. It was like, ugh. And so it wasn't until I suddenly found and fell in love with someone that all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is why people like sex.
Absolutely.
So I can completely understand, if you're satisfied with the way that your life is, then, it's not a dysfunction. It's only if you want to try to change the way it is. And that's what's so great about surrogate partners, because you're not, and forgive me for putting words in your mouth,
That's
but
okay.
you're not, you're not a prostitute. You're not like someone standing on the street and they hire you for sex. You are a therapist. You are someone's friend. You are someone's kind of, gateway into the sexual world if they don't know how to start, or if they're really awkward, or they just are really nervous about rejection. That's, I think, the biggest thing, is not being afraid of rejection, because unless someone's like, breaks your code of ethics, you're not going to be like, oh, you're too ugly for me, like, obviously.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So what goes into a session, and how long do those sessions usually last, and how long do those, how often do you meet that person? Because I know from the video he said it ranges a lot. So it could be everything from actually having sex with someone.
Absolutely.
Okay. Actually having sex with someone to just, going to the movies with them and holding their hand. It's all about helping that person get to the next level of what they want to be.
Yes.
And so how do you determine with that partner what they want to do, and what are some of the experiences you've had with therapy with different people?
So when we set out to begin this relationship, because that's why we started calling ourselves surrogate partners as opposed to sex surrogates. It is a full, type of relationship. It is simulating. I don't want to say simulating. That's not quite the right word, but you know what I mean. It's a relationship that I'm having with this person.
A no fear of rejection relationship.
Yes, precisely. And so when we do that, the first meeting is with a therapist. And that's when the client and the therapist really set out for me what their goals are, what they're trying that often impacts the amount of time, but we also don't ever really set out how much time.
You don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. Because there can often be, we'll say something like, I hear sometimes people say, let's talk about something easy, like erectile dysfunction, right? Or,
Easy.
yeah, exactly. And then it's ha ha ha. That's not easy, especially because you don't know what
our
brought that
society
about.
and our society says if you can't get an erection, you're a failure. Just like if you're a woman, and you don't want to have sex, you're a failure. Like there's a lot of layers of that we have to work past.
Yeah. So like it could be relatively easy, but it could be something where, if you've laid on years of shame around that or anxiety around that because you're just like I
losing
know this
your virginity, for instance.
Yeah.
I know. I didn't lose mine until I was 26, and when I did, it was actually really disappointing. I was just tired of being a virgin, so I was just like, fine, I'm gonna go have sex, and then it was boring and not fun at all. And Teen Vogue, which has some amazing pieces lately.
They do. They've been killing it lately.
They just did this one where it was interviews with like 16 girls on stuff that I think it was girls, maybe it was both, all I should say. But it was things that they wish they had known before they had sex for the first time. And a lot of them were like, I wish that I had known that, there weren't going to be fireworks, or I wish I hadn't stressed out so much about it, because that's going to affect if you enjoy it or not.
Absolutely.
And so again, that's why your work is important, because if someone has so much anxiety about making sure they do it right the first time, you can be a great step so that when they are with somebody that they want to have not an actual relationship, but a long-term, outside of therapy relationship, that they have the confidence that they're not going to be like, oh God. So
yes, absolutely. So determining time is a little bit tricky because sometimes you uncover things that maybe that person wasn't ready to talk about in their talk therapy. And it comes up when I touch them, right? And then I find out about sexual abuse or trauma or body shame. And so then, then we have to roll back a little bit and start over and do some more work on maybe it's body image or whatever it is. Sessions can be anything. I would say that sessions, we see a client once a week. We probably don't go less than... it takes about 3 months at least.
Okay.
We can see a client up to a couple of years, depending on if that's a need that they need.
And you can have multiple clients. Like, about how many clients is average at one time? Obviously not one per session, or during that session,
Yeah.
Concurrently.
Yeah, concurrently. Usually, 5, 6 is a good spot.
Okay.
You could do about 10. It's a lot of emotional labor.
I was going to say, you get emotionally attached to those people.
Yeah. So it's a lot about capacity there, and just do you have the capacity? Another reason to go back to why a lot of people become therapists too. And quick aside, if you cannot be a therapist to a client and their surrogate partner. It has to be 3 different people because it's kind of a checks and balances situation. So these people will have people that they're therapists to, and if they want to work with sex, if they're sex therapists and they want to work with surrogates, then they know who to refer to because they know us through the organization.
Right.
And then they'll have their clients that they work with other therapists with. So you cannot have, it is a triadic model. You can't be 2 sides of the triangle.
What about if someone starts out as a surrogate partner and then do they ever transition to therapist, or is that too complicated?
Yeah, a lot of them do, but they just keep those 2 businesses separate.
Because I would imagine
they'll clarify when people call up and they'll say, are you looking for me as a therapist or me as a surrogate? Because you cannot have both. I have to refer you to a therapist if you want me as a surrogate. I have to refer you to a surrogate if you want me as a therapist.
Yeah, because it's too much emotional toll for you, and also I imagine it makes it really difficult for your client, patient, your patient to delineate between, this is my therapist versus I'm falling in love with this person.
Yeah.
Because I imagine that is a huge problem that you have, probably a lot of training on how to deal with. And I'll get that in a second, but first...
Also, quick aside, it is also, just so everyone knows, it is actually completely illegal for therapists to engage in any sexual activity, or even really like touch can be kind of squidgy. That's a little more relaxed, and I won't get into that because I'm not the expert, but in general, super illegal. So that's why there are surrogate partners. So if you're a surrogate partner and a therapist, that's another reason that you have to do that. So there's for therapeutic reasons, but legally you can get into a lot of trouble.
That's something that was really eye-opening to me, is that there's even such thing as a surrogate partner. Because like I'm going to mention in a little bit, but I'm assuming you're familiar with that movie with Helen Hunt.
Yes.
Yes. When I saw that movie, I was like, wait, is this a real thing? Like, do these people actually exist? Because, you know, my understanding is that, like, legally there's no touch allowed. Only in that one, you know, in, what is it, Clark County in Las Vegas, that's like the only place in the whole U.S. that you can legally pay someone to be intimate with you. So the whole concept of, that's why when you say it goes back to the 60s, I'm like, whoa, really?
Yeah.
So I know you just said you're not an expert, but what is kind of the legal grounds? Like, how is how is surrogate partnership allowed legally?
Technically, it's not.
Okay.
There is nowhere in the United States that has any laws that say that, you know, sex work isn't legal, but except for surrogate partner therapy.
Okay.
However, it is determined to be there are many therapists who, the efficacy of surrogate partner therapy is like undeniable. There have been, so Masters and Johnson, to go back to them, in the 60s discovered that, so they started their work with partners, like people who were partnered up, and they were teaching them how to do sensate focus, which is something we do, and, you know, all these processes to help people with their sexual functioning. And then they were like overrun with people who, single people who were like, I have these problems too, and I have no one to work on them.
Right.
So they started seeking people in care professions, which is really interesting, nurses and teachers. And in this case, it was mostly men approaching Masters and Johnson, so it was usually women, and they needed to be in like committed relationships too, so they could stay really grounded and not like run off and with this person and damage the therapy. So that's kind of how that happened. And what they actually found was that the efficacy for working with your partner, this is still pretty good efficacy, so I don't want to knock it, but it was about 80% of
how is that
reaching your
reflected?
Sexual functioning.
How is that reflected? Like, how do they determine that efficacy?
When they set a goal, of, with Masters and Johnson, it was, I have difficulty getting and maintaining an erection, let's say.
So actually, like,
and they were able
quantifiable stuff. Even.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the first study that happened. It was 100. So with the surrogate partners that people worked with Masters and Johnson, there was 100% efficacy.
Wow.
Yes, a 100% success rate. There is another, also done in Israel. There was another much smaller study done with women who had vulvodynia and vaginismus. Once again, when they worked with their partners, it was about a 200-person sample.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm feeling super ignorant right now.
That's okay. So vulvodynia, there's a little bit of a variation. It's super painful. It's actually the opposite.
Oh, okay.
So vaginismus.
I had that for a while right after I gave birth. I could not have sex because it hurt.
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah, its triggers can be physical. They can be trauma-based. I mean, vaginismus and vulvodynia, we are still learning a whole lot about.
Yeah, the thing that I'm continually surprised by, or not surprised, but find interesting is in all these medical things, is finding out how much your emotional state and how much what's going on in your head controls what you're feeling. And like we were saying earlier, you know, if you have all these traumas, if you have these feelings of being a failure or whatever, that's going to compound your ability to respond.
Yes.
So that's definitely, you know, they're very related. So
and can directly impact even your pain receptors. So yeah, this study actually had the same result. It was about 80% efficacy for the test group that, the control group that worked with their partners, on the exact same exercises that we do, and then the group that worked with surrogate partners. In this case, I think it was all heterosexual women. So it was working with male surrogates, and they found that it was 100% efficacy. So that being said, legally, we exist in a gray area. No one has ever been prosecuted. A surrogate partner has never been prosecuted because of our code of ethics, and because what we do is so, because we stick to our code of ethics again, it's so
provably
therapeutic.
Yeah, provably therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'm not a fan of the argument, like, with the Las Vegas shooting and, you know, all these things. You see all these people like, well, it's the law, therefore it's right. And it's like, you know, they look at the Constitution. Well, according to the Constitution, you know, blacks are only worth 3/5 of the vote. Like, just because it's a law doesn't make it right. And clearly, you know, I'm a topless advocate. There's still plenty of states out there where a woman will be arrested and jailed if she takes her shirt off, just like a guy. So just because it's a law doesn't make it something that I think should be followed.
No.
Now, you know, flip side of that, I'm not saying go out and murder people, obviously. But, so another question I had, how do clients, I mean, you said that there was referred through a therapist. I'm assuming this is something that a lot of therapists don't necessarily know about. Like, they have to be specifically instructed that there is the option of a surrogate partner.
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
Actually, there are a lot of different ways. So things are becoming...
Look it up online.
Yeah. Things are becoming a lot more radical in a lot of ways in the therapeutic environment, especially if you're an ASECT member, a member counselor therapist. ASECT is the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. ASECT takes a hands-off approach on us. I won't necessarily get into why.
Just Google it.
Yeah, very privately, they love us, but they don't want to alienate. They don't want to. Yeah, they don't want to alienate people. They don't want to. Yeah, so they just. However, we are always invited to come speak. We always have at least one IPSA member at the conferences.
And these
They're
conferences
obviously not
are
okay with this.
for therapists and stuff like that to learn about other options?
Yeah,
Is that the
yeah,
concept? Okay.
it's continuing education.
Okay.
We're invited to attend. We are invited to present. They obviously don't dislike us. I mean, just, you know.
Yeah. They're just like, here's a platform.
Exactly.
I'm gonna look the other way.
Exactly. There's a lot of that in my
Yeah.
work. There's a lot of that.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Just if you're gonna allow, you know, if you're gonna recognize the that word is so hard to say, efficacy of surrogate partners, you know, you kind of have to, I feel like politicians and stuff in general, they really need to start making a stand.
I agree.
Like, I'm a big fan of Pod Save America, and they were doing a podcast a couple episodes ago, and they were talking about how politicians always sort of whiffle waffle and they never take a strong stance on anything. And I think that nowadays, you know, with the internet, with people being able to go back and look at past statements and stuff like that, politicians can't really get away with that anymore. You know, you can start holding them accountable. Be like, you know, people talking about the Las Vegas massacre, and they're like, what are your steps for preventing this from happening in the future? You can't just be like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, oh, it's a terrible thing that happened. Okay, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And so in regards to, you know, surrogate partners and stuff like that, I really hope that we, as, you know, people that are suffering under legislation now, as they start taking over, you know, elected official roles, that they are going to have a more clear stance on this kind of stuff.
I absolutely.
So I'm very hopeful. I know there's been a lot, you know, over the last 9 months, a lot of push for people to run for office, especially women to run for office. You know, like, there's resources out there, like, if you want to run for office, tell us and we'll help you. And I mean, I don't know, people have told me to run, I'm like, too much work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm way too brash for that. But anyway, sorry, that was a little tangent. So usually people, so you go to these talks where you spread to therapists.
So ASECT, like, I showed up to a regional, well, a Portland-based ASECT meeting, and there was one person out of 10 that didn't know what I did.
Okay.
That's pretty awesome.
So it's the worst kept secret kind of thing.
Like, yeah, I mean, now that I have to say, being on the West Coast makes a difference.
Yeah.
People know
Us
who we
liberal
are.
bubbles.
Yeah, people know who we are in LA. They know who we are in the Bay Area, and they even know who we are in Portland and Seattle. It is hard to find us. We used to actually have a code of ethics.
I was going to say, knowing that partner surrogates exist is not the same as knowing a partner surrogate that you can refer people to.
Yeah.
So
the website can do that. IPSA. A lot of times, this is how I even found the certification, was how do I become, and I didn't know the word was surrogate partner at the time, so how do I become a sex surrogate? And IPSA popped up. There are often times, and we want to make sure that people can access us. So there used to be a code of ethic that we couldn't advertise, and we don't really advertise, but like this, me putting myself out there, they realized that people were being seduced by folks who weren't, that could do a lot of damage to them, to these individuals.
I imagine that's a big problem, because that's why the whole idea of certification is so important, to prove that, you know, you are trained in this. You're not just, someone doesn't just decide one day, I'm going to put an ad out there. I am now, I am now a surrogate partner.
Yeah. So you can find us. So you can Google us.
Okay.
You know, if you, I don't even know what people sometimes look for. Like, because often people are just at the end of their rope by the time they get to us. It's like, I've been doing talk therapy for 10 years, and I still can't deal with this thing that I want to deal with. And, you know, at that point, I don't know what you look for, like radical sex therapy, and maybe we come up. I should try that sometime and see how people find us, but somehow they stumble upon us.
So mostly online?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the patients or the
clients? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So therapists tend to know about us. And then the third way is we actually do therapist trainings and outreach through IPSA. So I think I'm going to try and coordinate one out here, because there's not as bad as other places, but there is some misinformation that I want to kind of help out with.
Fake news.
Yeah. Just misinformation on legality and asect stance and all these different things. So
I mean, I work, well, I don't even, it's work. Why am I hesitating? I work in this kind of thing, and even I'm like fairly clueless. So I imagine someone who has, no idea about this, there's a lot of room for, like you said, misinformation or assumptions and stuff like that. That's why, we'll get to that movie in a little bit. I just wanted to clarify, when you say that someone looks up online and finds out about surrogate partners, do they still have to contact the therapist and get recommended?
They can actually, yes, I think that's true. I had to think about that. I think that's traditionally, they'll try and find a therapist that will work with a surrogate partner, or they'll bring it to their therapist, because a lot of them, like I said, have already been in therapy and they're like, this isn't working. But another way that they can do it is they can actually go to IPSA's webpage, go to the contact page, and we have a list of therapists that will work with surrogates. And so we can hook you up with the therapist and the surrogate.
And we kind of have been touching this all over. Unintentional pun. I just realized that video's playing. I'm like, what is that sound? Stop. Freaking, I love you, Stephen Colbert or John Oliver, but I don't want to watch you right now. I drank way too much coffee. Damn it. I lost it. So I just want to clarify, because I'm sure a lot of people are curious, what are kind of some of the things that you do in therapy? Because you were mentioning like hand holding all the way to having sex or whatever. Like, what, as much as you can consolidate it, what is an average session like?
Okay. So usually a client will come in. We will say hi. I will typically ask them, depending on where we are in the therapy and their comfort, ask them if I can hug them.
And this is the first one?
This is at any time.
Okay.
Yeah, just any time, and we'll sit down. I'll ask them questions, how they're doing, how their last session with their therapist was. We also consult with a therapist. Ideally, they consult with us after every session, and we consult with them after every that they have and every session that we have. So I do know some of this information, but I'm part of the triadic model, is that you're getting information from the therapist, you're getting information from what you're gleaning, from what you're seeing as you're working with a client and as you're talking to them, and then you're getting some self-reflection from the client. And all of that actually helps you to get a good clinical picture of what's going on. Because
people, they don't know themselves often enough. Just in regards to that, how does the Hippocratic Oath affect your triage?
Yeah, so we get we get a consent for release of information so that we can share that information back and forth.
Okay. And
yeah, and
everyone's
so the client
fully
has to
aware.
sign that, and yeah, yes.
And does that usually entail basically anything in those therapy, or only as it relates to your work with that person?
It can include it. We basically make sure that it includes anything, so that we make sure that we really can. Because again, the whole goal is to make sure that the client is getting what they need,
Mm-hmm.
and so we, I mean, of course, for efficiency's sake, because we usually just check in like 10-15 minutes. It's pretty quick. We get on the phone. This is, this is what happened in my session. This is what happened in my session. I'm noticing this. I think maybe, next session I should do this. That kind of stuff.
Okay.
Or maybe you might want to ask this client about. So it distills
Like you said, if
down
you find
into,
out, if they find out like, oh, they have sexual trauma or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, then you say to the therapist, I think it would be helpful for this client if we try to get them to talk about this thing a little more.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, we want to make sure that we can really dig deep, and so we don't want to limit
Mm-hmm.
it by this legal document that says we can only talk about certain things,
Yeah.
right? So the client will come in, we'll talk a little bit. I might hold their hand, ask to hold their hand, of course, and then hold their hand while they're talking. Yeah.
That'd be
and that just
traumatizing,
kind of
geez.
builds, familiarity and relaxation and all those different things.
How often do you talk about yourself to them, or is it all about the client?
They can know bits. They may know that, I have a partner, or, I might say, yeah, I'm kind of having an emotionally vulnerable day. I just want to let you know that. So
you have equal footing with them a little more.
yeah, but we don't want to, and this is actually another part of our code of ethics, is we don't want to burden.
Right.
This isn't quite the same as a more organic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, while I can unload on my partner, like that's an agreement that we've made. And while aspects of a more organic relationship can be therapeutic, it's not explicitly therapeutic. I am there for that client. They are paying me to help them through this process. So I don't want to burden them with my own life that much.
Yeah.
But it is important for them to build a bond with me.
Right.
And so sharing little things, you know.
I think that's definitely a point of difficulty for a lot of people, is the cliche of a therapist or whatever. Well, first of all, there's a cliche that you're a weak little snowflake if you need to talk about your feelings, whatever. But I think there's also this fear of like being condescended to, or of like, this person's just collecting the check, they don't actually care about you. So, I think giving pieces of your own fragility and history and everything helps you bond with that person, but at the same time, like you said, you don't want to overload that person, because it's about helping them, it's not about helping both of you. That's what actual, every word is so problematic. Organic, like you said, an organic relationship, that's more give and take. And so when people come seek you out, I'm, like you said, trouble having erections is probably a big one that happens. Sexual trauma, how they get past that to have touch. What other kind of dissatisfactions do people come to a surrogate partner to figure out?
Yeah, late life virginity.
Okay.
Um,
That's a big one.
Yep. And especially the longer you go, the more anxiety that you can build around that.
For sure.
So the older you get, yeah, exactly. The older you get, the more you tend to want someone that you feel safe with, exploring, this level of intimacy with. People with disabilities, because of the desexualization.
Like the movie with Helen Hunt, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it is they just aren't granted the opportunity because we really desexualize people with physical disabilities. Sometimes we will see clients with cognitive disabilities. However, that can be...
Permission-wise, I would think it's...
Yeah, you have to be very careful. You really have to make sure you know where they cognitively actually are, because they may request this, but then there's this power dynamic. And, yeah, you want to make sure that person is like really, really, truly able to consent to that. But it is not unheard of. But I would say by and large, people with physical disabilities. We see people who are exploring their sexuality on the Kinsey scale.
Right.
You know?
I would think that would be a big one because, you know, you do have the Hippocratic Oath where you can't turn around and be like, oh, I just had a session with this person who thinks she might be a lesbian. Like, you're not going to tell anyone. So you're more trustworthy than just someone at a club.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting one. And that actually brings me to my next question. And I'm sorry, I'm totally off book, but that's why I say this is like a interview / conversation, because I like to be a little more organic. What are your experiences as far as, you know, male, like what are some of the comparisons of sessions with, you know, typical woman with man versus, you know, with people who are exploring their Kinsey scale and stuff like that? Is there a difference between those sessions, or is it pretty much kind of the same thing?
There is a difference.
Okay. More hesitancy, or?
Yeah, that can be a factor. They may not be willing to accept this part of them because of, you know, they're ashamed. So that can be a piece of it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give you
So
a difficult
I'm just
question.
like I'm holding my tongue a little bit about working with male clients because there can be patriarchal obstacles. How about that?
I was actually, because another thing that I was thinking of when we first started talking is, you know, we're talking about people being hesitant to say, hey, I'm worried that I'm still a virgin, or whatever their hesitation is. Whereas I'm thinking, like, one of my friends, she posts these conversations on Facebook that she's had on dating sites where she puts very clearly in her profile, don't talk to me about my looks, don't talk to me about sex in the first message or whatever. And constantly she gets guys who are like, hey, sexy, do you like giving blowjobs? And it's just like, for me, what I witness is the opposite. I see a lot of typically cis men who are just like, let's talk about sex right now. And so I'm wondering, is it like almost a rubber band effect where in reality they're actually really shy about it, and so when they're actually in a situation where they could have sex, they don't want to ask for it? Is that seem like a fair assumption?
There's a lot of hesitation. Yeah.
It's sort of like when people are an asshole online, but then in real life they're like, ugh.
Yeah, no, they're very what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable. Yeah.
They would hate to admit, which makes them more vulnerable.
And it can be very difficult too, because I just attended a really great training on Saturday called Race and Sexuality Intersections, and it was a workshop for professionals. And this kind of came up, this discussion of like, you know, a lot of the people there were therapists. There was a somatic sex coach, and there was me, and we were kind of having this conversation, and you know, around, what if you're starting to get the feeling that this person's depression or whatever has to do with, in this case, you know, racism and, you know, white supremacy? The same can be said, what if you have suspicions that this person's concern have a lot to do with how, like, with patriarchy, you know, and how we demand that men act. The bottom line is, you really shouldn't let them, like, you shouldn't tell them they need to decide, and you can kind of drop little breadcrumbs and
decide what?
To kind of come to that conclusion.
Okay.
Right? But I see a lot of that. I see a lot of, like, you know, I'm not a man if I can't do these things. You know,
I'm a failure if I can't do
I'm a
these
failure, yeah. And then of course you layer on that, you know, and you kind of mentioned this with the whole, like, you're a snowflake if you need therapy, but men are not supposed to talk about their feelings unless it's anger. And so it takes some time.
Yeah,
with
there's a
men
lot of
in a way
biases that you got to work through. Yeah, you know, when I one of the last protests I went to, Slut Walk was actually the first one I went to after a couple of months of break there, partly because I was busy with the baby and moving and everything, but also partly because the last one I went to before that was March for Truth. And when I went there, 3 different white guys came up to me and were like talking at me, like at separate times. The last one was the worst. He runs his little YouTube channel. He's basically, I don't know if you ever heard of Sargon of Akkad or any of those people, but basically they're YouTubers that make their career out of filming protests or whatever and like making fun of the people there. Like the titles were like SJW gets owned or whatever. And he followed me around and he was filming and I'm like, dude, I'm not mentally prepared. I'm tired. I'm not, I don't have all these argument points. And he was like basically yelling at me like, what? How is a black guy with a job versus a white guy that is homeless? Like, how can you say that the white guy has privilege and all this other stuff? And I was trying to tell him specifically in regards to topless topics, and topless equality, the patriarchy hurts everyone. The patriarchy is telling women you exist as a sexual object or you don't exist at all, and it's also telling men, like you said, if you admit to any emotion besides anger, you're a failure. And I was like, the patriarchy hurts everyone, and his response was like, why do you always bring it back? Why are you moving the goalposts? And I was like, what does that even?
Oh my goodness.
So that was just really frustrating.
Decontextualizing things.
I know, and I just was like, I am not mentally prepared with this guy.
Yeah.
And like that's something where I have so much respect for what you do because, with my videos, there's all these really important, serious things that I really want to talk about, and I'm always hesitant because it's a lot of work to prepare all those facts and everything, and it's also a lot of work to prepare yourself emotionally for how people are going to respond.
Absolutely.
And so you have a lot of courage to be broaching these kinds of things. So the last thing I wanted to mention in regards to this nebulous version of how it relates to partners is a lot of the attitudes I see online are, and I'm trying really hard not to generalize, this is from my personal experience, there was a lot of anger behind being a, young or youngish, usually white guy, like you're expected to have sex or whatever. How do you think that they might be influenced into considering surrogate partner? Like, is there something you can say that would comfort them that it's not a sign of weakness and that it might help them? It's like a really hard question, but
no, it's
I'm not sure how to frame it.
Honestly, their circumstances bring them there. It gets bad enough. It becomes like a critical status. So I don't usually have to do it. Like it's an easy question because I don't have to do that one.
Yeah, because usually they come to you.
Now, do I think that
them.
a friend and I were talking, and we were talking about how therapy, like everybody can benefit from therapy. Everyone can benefit from therapy. Everyone can benefit from a lot of what we do, and I did kind of want to bring it back to like finishing up what a session is. So
Sorry.
that's okay. No, it's just I just don't want people to be like. What the hell does she do? She just talk to him the whole time? Because that's not true. I don't, yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects of what we do, and that's a lot of what I talked about at Slutwalk was like, you may not be...
Go watch the video. I have the video of her speak at Slutwalk. So.
Yeah, and if you have questions, like, reach out to me because I wasn't able to, like, really explicitly talk about these things. I can give you that information. I can talk to you about it. Like, I want people... My goal in this world is to have people feel like they are intimately entrenched with the people that they love and care about and that they are sexually satisfied, if it only takes you this much as opposed to this much, which is who I work with, let me help you get to that much. Like, no big deal. I don't mind.
And I mean, if you're shy, you don't want people to know that you asked someone, like, online is a huge benefit. You can just make a dummy account and email and have these questions answered. I mean, that's what I'm really hoping this video not only, lets people know about surrogate partners, but also provides the information if you do have questions. Go ahead and email, and if you don't want to email her specifically, you can email me and then I can ask her or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. So
sessions.
Oh yeah. So sessions.
Not Jeff Sessions. Ugh.
Yeah. No. Although he could probably really benefit from this too. But
The whole joke.
That aside. Yeah. So with a session, we'll often do it depends. So we have 3 different I say 4 components. There are technically 3, but I think mutuality is such an important part. So there's relaxation. A lot of our sessions are teaching people how to belly breathe and doing little like jumping exercises to get you back into your body and to your physicality, to reconnect you to your physical awareness, your actual like nerve endings as you're doing things.
Because I know something I see people online talk about is having a disconnect with your body. I especially imagine with like
I was just going to say, men experience that so much more than women do.
Yeah, I was wondering gender dysphoria too. I imagine is a big problem.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. We also do work with trans people, and that's that can be a variety of different things. As they're transitioning, helping them just be a person who helps them to explore their body with them. That can be a part of it. It can be, as they're just, kind of deciding if, am I trans? We can be there for that part. We can be post-op when you have all different parts and you're like, all right, now what? Like we can be a part of that.
Yeah, it's like how do I reconcile my head notion of what gender is versus what my body wants? And that's one thing that I think is fascinating and that I'm really excited to see progress happening is separating gender from sexuality. Because the thing I see with a lot of trans people is like, well, how can I be a woman if my body wants me to, have sex in a cis way? Like, how can I reconcile that? And that's why I love that we're making a lot of progress. Like, I checked out from the library and I haven't watched it yet. The National Geographic just came out with a documentary that's something about gender or something.
I heard about that.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Okay. Yeah, you have to send me notice. I heard about it and I was intrigued.
Yeah, I just saw it in the library.
Especially because National Geographic was bought up by Fox News.
Oh,
or that conglomerate,
that.
And I know that happened.
Horrible.
Well, but it sounds like it's actually really good. So I'm so curious about how that how they are able to keep that
separate,
that nature still intact, even though they've been picked up by Fox News. Yeah.
Well, I will do a review of it and I'll let you know.
So sessions.
Yeah.
So
I'm really bad at it.
It's okay. It's a lot for me to stick in, so part of me is like, I just want to leave it. But, in the beginning, it's a lot of, the session will be focused on relaxation exercises or communication exercises. And that'll be like the one or two things we'll do. And then eventually we start to get into the more explicitly erotic and sensual, where we start doing sensate focus exercises. So like for that day, we might do the sensate focus where we touch and explore objects. Again, getting you back to getting used to experiencing pleasure in something that isn't your genitals, right? Because we're so genitally focused.
I just keep thinking of all these things that happened, during my journey through asexuality. Like I remember having a huge crush on this guy, and yet I couldn't get myself to hold hands with him. I was just like, no, I can't. And now it's like
out of nervousness or...
I think it was just for me it was such a big deal. And it's like, not to totally arrest the conversation again, but back in the day I was very into anime, and the thing you see a lot in anime is like touching, like holding hands is a big deal in a lot of anime. And yet here in America the stereotype is like, oh, it's so easy, you just hug everybody. But it totally ranges. I mean, I never gave hugs until like the last couple of years. I was like, don't touch me. So definitely
I mean, we all have varying levels of comfort with those things. Holding hands can be like
traumatizing.
Crazy. It can be a crazy intimate experience that can then traumatize you. I mean, we don't give it enough power. Like we really should be thinking a lot more about the way we do that, or gazing into someone's eyes.
I was really bad at that too.
I mean, that's.
I have a
that
friend.
Can be really intense.
I have a friend who I haven't actually looked her blog up in forever, but she's a lesbian and she does this blog about basically being LGBT in San Diego. And originally it started as a travel thing, and then she kind of touched on sexuality, and she was like asking our feedback, and I was like, I think that's a little more important. Like that's, and she had this one that was really great that was like, it was a little condescending, but it was information for dudes at like clubs and stuff. Like, everyone, like you've probably seen that black and white picture of a person where you like highlight, this is okay to touch whenever, this is only sometimes okay if I know you well. And she was basically putting her out there and saying, that's why touching a hip or something, to you it might not be a big deal, but for other people it's very like, especially when there's this attitude of possession or the indicative sexual violence behind it. And a lot of guys are like, oh, rape's not a big deal, I'm not raping you, I'm just grabbing your wrist. And it's like, think about it, if someone taller
it's a way of exerting control though.
If someone bigger, stronger, and who society says basically has the right to do whatever they want to you, grabs you by your wrist, that's terrifying. So please don't just be like, oh, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, I will let you finish your
That's
session.
okay, no. Yeah, so we do sensate focus. So we do a hand caress and we close our eyes and I touch them with my eyes closed just for my own pleasure. We're teaching them to touch for their own pleasure. And we progressively get more and more sensual and erotic, right? So we start with hands, we do a foot bath, we do a face caress, we've then done some disrobing, and these are like each of these is a session basically.
Give them time to process.
Yeah, because afterwards we always talk about that experience. We let them ask questions of us. Just this Sunday, I just want to do a quick plug because it was actually really well done. CNN, This Is Life with Lisa Ling was just their season premiere went out, and it was called Sexual Healing. Half of it is with Psalm Isadora, who was a tantric worker in, I think, LA. She has since passed away. And then the other half is actually with a surrogate partner in San Francisco named Emiko Yoshikami.
All these liberal bubbles.
I know, right? Exactly.
Sorry if you live in the middle of the country.
And I highly suggest you watch, because if you want to get an idea of what our sessions look like,
it's very
it was
accurate.
very well done.
Okay.
Yeah, the producers did a really great job.
I will look it up and put it in the description.
Yeah. So I would highly suggest that if you want to get an idea of what one session, because each of these is one session. We do body image stuff. We do a body image mirror meditation where you disrobe completely and you talk about your head or your body from head to toe, how you feel about it, both the way it feels, its form, how it looks, and its function, how it functions. You talk about everything: your eyes, your nose, your genitals.
When they say these things, if you hear them saying oh, my face is ugly or whatever, do you interject or?
No, because we want them to create their own kindness and love in their body. And a lot of times just standing there naked, and I'm naked too with them, sitting, listening to them. And I always demonstrate. That's another reason. So I do the exercise with the client, and then they do the exercise with me, so that we can learn about that reciprocation. So that's why these sessions will take a lot of time. You might think, oh, a hand caress for 10 minutes, and that's all you do in a session. Well, no, there's introductions, and we talk about everything, and then we do the hand caress. I do it, then they do it, and then we talk about it.
And that, I would imagine, is another huge difference between surrogate partner versus the stereotypical prostitute. Is a lot of people do hire a prostitute just to hold them or whatever, but the stereotype is you just hire them, have sex, and then you're done. Yeah. So there's a lot of layers.
There's not any kind of sanctioned processing or discussion. It happens. I know sex workers, and that is something that happens. I know strippers that people pay for lap dances just to sit and talk to those strippers.
And that's why having more acceptance for surrogate partners is so important, because the stripper didn't sign up to be your emotional therapist. Maybe she has her own things that she's dealing with. So finding someone with training is definitely a preferred.
And who for sure wants to do that. These people fulfill those roles, but if you're not necessarily getting into that work because you want to be a healer, that's an undue burden on that person.
Yeah,
that
actually seems like something that I think happens a lot with regarding the patriarchy, whatever. Men aren't allowed to talk about feelings with each other, so when they're with a woman, sometimes it just sort of bleh, and it's again, unless you're trained and prepared and you want to have that kind of session, the woman doesn't know how to deal with it. And that's why something I struggle with a lot is, obviously on my videos I get a lot of perverted comments. I get a lot of, will you have the sex with me? No matter how many times I say I will never do porn, I still have all these people do stuff with that, and I have to really struggle not to lash out at them, because I know a lot of them are trolls and are just trying to be an asshole, but a lot of them also, they don't know how to ask. And so they're just society is as a man, you are a sexual creature, so you either don't talk about feelings at all or you jump to sex. There's no asking about emotions. So you go to, when you do go all the way or whatever, how does that differ, I guess, from the cliche of, I'm really trying not to be offensive, but how does that differ from the cliche of hiring a prostitute? Other than the talking about it before and after.
Yeah, I think other than that, I'm not sure it does.
Okay.
Except for this is much more explicit healing than it is for sexual gratification and entertainment. So
you're not going to do a lap dance.
yeah, and also let's be honest, it might not be the wildest sex that you're ever going to have.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the point. I mean, we want you to have connective sex and to feel good and feel like you can achieve the goal that you want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And then we close our therapy at a certain point, and you get to go have that wild sex with someone else. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily
both enjoy it, hopefully.
Yeah, we don't have.
Or all enjoy it if there's more than 2 people.
Exactly. We don't have the. And here's a little sex worker solidarity. I mean, I have a lot of sex worker solidarity, but here I'm going to explicitly say it. I have deep empathy for them because while maybe they don't, have to
have long
emotionally do what I have to do, there's a performative piece that is required of them that is not required of me, right? That must be exhausting. I mean, for me, it would be. This is why we get into the things we get into, right? Mm-hmm. I am not a performer. I am not really an entertainer.
Yeah.
I am a healer, and so that's kind of that's why surrogacy drew me in. Prostitutes or strippers, they might enjoy. I'm assuming most of them who stick to it and really like it do it because they enjoy that piece. Mm-hmm. But for me, I'm like, oh God, no! Like that sounds terrifying to have to like create this incredible.
I can completely understand because it's like comments on my video or whatever, like, oh, you get so much more famous if you did sexual things on camera, and first of all, I think that would hurt my whole trying to separate
everything you're trying to do.
I'm a female with my tits out. That doesn't mean that I'm here for your sexual objectification. But also, like, that's not what I'm interested in. I don't want to be that. But as I always keep saying, even though people don't believe it, I'm not anti-sex worker. I think it's great, and I don't understand why it's illegal, and I think that that's silly. Again, going back to, like, just because something's illegal doesn't mean that it's wrong. But that's definitely not my forte.
Yeah.
So, making a delineation between being a therapist, being a partner surrogate partner. Bleh, why is it hard to...
You could say partner surrogate.
And being, I mean, is there a better word for, like, prostitute sounds derogatory, but...
I actually heard a debate about this a little bit on a podcast, Unzip PDX, which is hosted by Elle, who put...
Slutwalk.
Yeah, put Slutwalk on. Or she and another... I'm forgetting her name now.
I did an interview with her.
Okay,
so
great. But they were actually discussing that, and it seems that the least offensive and what most sex workers are kind of okay with is the word escort.
Escort, okay.
Yeah, but I have a friend, they are actually a friend of my partner, and they actually prefer to say hooker. So, like, you kind of never know. It's whatever they're comfortable with and what they like, but I've heard escort is kind of
escort.
more generally okay.
I will try to use escort instead of prostitute in the future. I'm gonna kind of skip some of these because this is really fun, and I feel bad that I'm like taking up so much of your time.
No, it's fine.
And this video is gonna be like 12 hours long, but so I guess let's get back to that video because we keep mentioning it. So just for people who haven't seen it, the movie that I was referring to with Helen Hunt, it's called The Sessions, originally titled The Surrogate, and this is the little bio from Wikipedia. It's a 2012 U.S. independent drama film written and directed by Ben Lewin. It is based on the article on Seeing a Sex Surrogate by Mark O'Brien, a poet paralyzed from the neck down due to polio who hires a sex surrogate to lose his virginity. So I guess it was based on a true story. And, it was in 2012. It's been a few years since I saw it. But like I said, for me, it was sort of mind-blowing that such a thing exists. So as much as you remember that movie, what parts do you think are accurate and what parts do you think aren't accurate?
So it's a little hard to judge only because Mark O'Brien actually sought therapy in the 80s. And it was a little bit, we were still kind of working things out. Like IPSA had just been started about 10 years before, and we were, so I can say, I can look back at what happened and be like, oh, well, we would never do that now. But it's hard to know if that was acceptable then, right? And if that was allowed then. So
like, what kind of stuff wouldn't be allowed now?
We would never have disrobed in a first session, and I can actually pretty confidently say that would never happen. Even in the 80s, that just it's terrifying. not so much for me. I mean, I'm used to being without my clothes, but for a client.
So in the movie, she's very sort of forceful, where she's like, today you are going to take your clothes off or whatever, and I imagine that that's totally inaccurate, and you would never force a client to do that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So is that the main thing about that movie that's not accurate?
Yeah, and she also says that that they're only gonna have 6 sessions and it'll be done. Again, but that actually might have been accurate in the 80s. That's the one I'm not so sure about. But we don't have a set amount, and it's like, if you haven't reached the therapy by this time, well, too bad. Like, that's a bummer.
That's gotta be rejection.
And like, because we are not inexpensive and we are not covered by insurance, so that would be a terrible thing for somebody to spend that much money
and still have that huge problem.
Yeah, and still not have reached the goal that they want to reach. I mean, that would be awful. I wouldn't want to do that to somebody.
Yeah, you don't want to just pull the rug out of under them.
Exactly.
That's something, I could see the defense of that just being that maybe it helps you kind of avoid them falling in love with you. Because that's obviously something, and I mean, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but I imagine that that's something that you had a lot of training with how to deal with, because inevitably, it happens with nurses, it happens with any kind of person helping you. Very, very often the client falls in love with the therapist.
Yes.
So what are your, I mean, I don't know how much you're allowed to say, but what is kind of your process for that? How do you help someone to not be in love with you?
Yeah. So we do a lot of mindfulness, and we create a lot of containers for people to
Mind Palace. Sherlock.
We create a lot of containers for people to so they are allowed to experience arousal, and it's a lot easier for a woman because there's not really an outward show of that, but like with men, in the CNN show, this is so great that they actually showed this up. It's like, oh my God, this is so great. And Emiko's doing a face caress on her client, Keith. And at the end, they actually show, because he's laying down, his head is in her lap, and she's doing this lovely face caress. And they show his erection, which for CNN is pretty impressive. And they just showed that, and they just let it sit there. And I was like, that is a perfect metaphor for what we do. You are allowed
You don't
to
be like, look at the...
Yeah, you're allowed to experience it. We're not saying don't experience arousal. We're not saying don't experience love feelings for us. It's going to happen. Like, the therapy happens, and we're going to experience those feelings for our clients.
But maybe
and the difference is you don't act on it. Right?
Recognize it, accept it, and then move on.
Yeah, and know that this therapy is going to come to a close because you deserve the right to experience this with other people. Yeah, exactly. Outside of this explicitly sanctioned relationship.
There's a safety, but there's a limitation. So, yeah, I mean, I just recently did a photo shoot because I'm trying to get pictures so I can fund a website, whatever, I'm not going to get into it. And the guy that I did it with, I thought he was experienced with nude photo shoots. Turns out he wasn't. He told me straight up at the beginning, hey, just so you know, I've never done this before. I'm probably going to have a reaction. And I had this sort of moral dilemma where part of me was like, why are you telling me this? Why are you burdening me with this? Like, what am I supposed to try extra hard to not be sexy to help you? But at the same time, it was like, I'm kind of glad that he warned me, like, I'm not trying to, it's just my body reacting. And so, again, all these videos and stuff, it's part of my process of learning to not judge and learning to accept. People come from different backgrounds, they're going to have different reactions. It doesn't necessarily, if a guy watches my videos, and I actually get a lot of comments like this, people are like, how do I watch your videos without getting an erection? And I'm like, it's not that you watch my videos and you're not allowed to have an erection, it's if you watch my videos and then are like, I'm gonna masturbate. Like, you're choosing to sexualize my videos. And that's something that a lot of guys resist. They're like, oh, well, you're putting your tits out there that you want me to, and then you get into rape culture territory.
Yeah, breasts are not inherently sexual.
And the whole idea of like, oh well, you know, female breasts are, but men's aren't. I'm always like, that's only since the 30s have men been allowed to go. That actually was going to be something I was going to kind of bring up is in regards to my particular kinds of videos where I mostly am fighting for equality with toplessness. I mean, I am, you know, a nudist and everything like that, and I get a lot of questions like, how do you tell the difference, but blah, blah, blah. But my focus is on legislative and mainly how social media treats topless women, because as I mentioned, you know, there's these YouTubers there's hundreds of them. Their careers on YouTube, they get thousands of dollars on Patreon and stuff. Their careers are built out of attacking other people. And somehow in the mind of YouTube and Facebook and stuff like that, I mean, Facebook's got the whole Russian propaganda and everything, like they have their own issues, obviously. But I am continually baffled that social media says it's okay to make a job out of attacking other people, but my videos, if I have my shirt off, I get taken off YouTube. I get taken off Facebook. I get banned. I get, you know, automatically, oh, this is porn or whatever. So, you know, again, like as a partner, surrogate partner, you know, you are doing, in a broad sense, you are doing sex work, but it's therapy. So it's like, how do you, what would your argument be, I guess, for why that should be allowed? Like, do you allow everything, or do you think that hateful stuff should be banned, but therapy should be allowed?
That's a really complex question.
The tolerant left.
Well, no. Yeah. Let's just not censor for a second.
Dude, I swear.
Let's do the brave choice. Let's do the brave choice. Yeah, no, I'm really. All right, here we go. I am really fucking sick and tired of, you know, I mean, rape threats are allowed on Facebook. I mean, there is some heinous shit. Yeah, I think that should be banned. Now, and this is where things get so complicated, is like, you know, we're so in love with our First Amendment. And, you know, to a point, like, I'm glad it exists, but this delineation between legality and, like, you thinking that you don't get to have any consequences for the hateful shit you do. Yeah. That's not acceptable.
That's the thing. Like, these white supremacists who are, like, losing their jobs and stuff because they're like, you're ruining my First Amendment. No, I have the right, if I know that you have these hateful notions that you espouse, I have the right to not have to work with you. Yeah. So. Yeah.
And so, you know, while legally, yes, these things are allowed, I mean, Facebook and YouTube are already basically in the game of regulating morality, right? They're doing that by censoring women's bodies.
Yeah, like that thing that came out years ago that they still haven't really altered, where Facebook specifically says no camel toe, no female nipples.
I didn't know about that camel toe. Oh my god.
Yeah, it is so, like, specifically like this part of women's bodies, that part of women's bodies, this part of, and yet guys, it's like, whatever. And it's just like,
there's no mention of, we can't see your cock and balls in your pants.
It's like, basically like no genitals. That's all it says. It doesn't have anything that's specifically men only. From what I remember, I mean, it's been a while since I saw it, and that's something that drives me nuts, because again, mentioning legality versus is it okay, like, technically all this is legal, but, you know, a lot of the attitude I get is from people that are like, when I protest against Facebook and YouTube and stuff taking my stuff down, is, well, they have the right, you know, it's their platform or whatever, and it's like, this is maybe a huge jump, but, you know, diners in the 50s, like, they had the right to tell people of certain race not allowed to go there. I don't think that makes it right. No. And so I think that's a dumb argument.
Yeah, and that's kind of what drives me crazy, is like, you've decided that you're going to partake in the business of you know, the culture war of morality, okay? But you're on the wrong side of it, you know, and they're on the wrong side of it because that is, you know, it's entrenched in white supremacy and patriarchal values, and
gotta keep the sponsors happy.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, like, there's not even, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe there is, but I don't see any evidence of them actually trying to challenge their thoughts. They put out some like wimpy, you know, apologetic, I'm sorry that this offends you, which is my least favorite thing in the world. Yeah, they'll just be like, oh, well, I'm sorry that this doesn't, you know, that you're upset about this. Let me put this on you. But we are still not going to change that policy.
And they don't stick to it because, like, they allow breastfeeding photos, but you look up banned breastfeeding photo on Facebook, there's still countless things.
Yeah, it's still getting deleted.
Yeah.
And I think Facebook is the worst. I mean, like, as far as censoring that. But I know that Instagram has issues with that, and YouTube, and...
well, Instagram was the one that Chelsea Handler posted the picture of herself mimicking Putin on horseback. Putin is topless, she's topless, hers got taken down, Putin didn't. And this is still the case. This was years ago, and it hasn't improved at all. I mean, we have these celebrities who, you know, they'll post one picture topless or whatever, and Instagram takes it down, and everyone's like, oh, how dare they? Nothing changes.
Yeah.
They might allow that one picture, but they still don't change their...
No, the policy has never changed. It's never changed.
And it's so frustrating to me that so many people don't seem to care.
Yeah.
That's something that I continually, like... You know, I'm entrenched in this. I do videos like this, you know, almost every day. I'm always online I'm reading the comments, I'm reading, you know, Googling. Like, I have such a hard time finding a live stream service where I can upload my videos. Vimeo is the only video hosting that I've found that will allow non-sexual nudity. But live streaming wise, everyone bans it. Vimeo just rolled out live streaming, and I haven't actually looked if they have the same results or same rules on their live streaming versus their video, but their cheapest package is $75 a month for 5 hours of streaming.
Oh my god.
And I'm just like,
that's unreasonable. Yeah.
But it's so frustrating that there's all these platforms with, you know, I will happily let advertisers put their ads on my video if that's what it takes to get these videos out there. But, you know, I started on YouTube. I started on YouTube a long time ago, but with Topless Topics, I started on YouTube, and for about a year and a half, I was doing videos. I was doing topless videos, and they were getting, you know, age restricted and stuff, but they weren't getting banned. And then all of a sudden, YouTube started taking my stuff down. And I felt so betrayed. Because it was like I was building, you know, obviously like 90% of the people were just there to be like, oh, I masturbated. But I was connecting to people. I was forming, you know, relationships with people who were like, yes, I support you, I get it, or whatever. And then all of a sudden YouTube's like, oh, we just noticed you, we don't like this, bye. And it was like, so now I'm on Vimeo, but people don't know how to use Vimeo. And it's very hard to direct them. And that's, you know, legislatively, I would love to see more topless equality. And in fact, legislatively, there is a lot of equality, but how the police enforce it is very different. There's a lot of harassment. My main goal, I think, is social media first, because laws are going to change to reflect the people. And until I can get YouTube and Facebook and stuff to stop being like, oh, rape threats are fine, but oh my god, you're a female with nipples, that's bleh. I'm ranting, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I did just a few minutes ago, so it's fine.
Have you had any issues with that when, like, you say that, like, advertising surrogate partners is kind of a new thing, but have you seen anything where, like, posts have been taken down or anything like that? Or you get a lot of hate mail, or?
No. What I do is so private.
Figure most people don't even know about it, so.
Yeah, and oftentimes when I'm telling people what I do, they don't even necessarily, I mean, like, it has to be something this long for me to give people an idea.
I know, my mom was like, how long is your thing gonna be? I don't know, like half an hour.
Yeah, no, I mean, it takes
Stop
a
being
long
so good
time
and so fun to talk to.
I mean, so for me to make it explicit what I do would take a lot of you know, space, whether that's a big giant
and
post
it's still
on
mostly
Facebook
talking, so like we said,
talking
you can pretty much say whatever you want. You can, you know, say death to Jews, and YouTube's like, but
whatever. But so I don't really deal with that very much.
You don't really deal with censorship online.
No, but we did talk about this, you know, and actually, if you don't mind, if we go a little tangentially on this.
Oh, please. I mean, I'm the queen of tangents.
we chose not to take off our tops today, but we had discussed it, and, you know, I emailed you back. I said, I really want to. However, I have concerns from IPSA, and I am not throwing IPSA under the bus here. So... because they're reacting
they're in gray area. They gotta be careful.
Yeah, they're reacting to the culture in which we all operate, right? And so something we talked about was, dress. I mean, like, I have to basically dress like a school teacher when I meet the therapist and the client, because and especially when you like have breasts like I do,
I know you see these posts that go viral of like a school teacher where just by wearing outfits, it's like, oh, she's trying to be sexual. She's just wearing an outfit.
Yeah.
Bodies do things.
Yeah. And the fatter you are and the bigger breasted you are, the more inappropriate you are just by existing. And I am both of those things. I'm fat and I have big breasts.
Although I have to say, even as a skinny little white girl, I had a job once where I wore like a tank top or something like that. And I didn't work with the clients at all. All I did was make phone calls. And it was a temporary job, thank God. But the boss was like, that's offensive, you have to cover up more. All I had was a faux fur jacket in my car. It was 90 plus degrees. I had to wear a faux fur jacket because this woman was like, I don't want to see this. And I'm just like, really?
I was once told, working at a restaurant in South Florida, I came in with just like it wasn't even spaghetti strap, it was just like a thick strap, like just a basic, sheath dress. Super cute, looked really great. I was super excited about it, and I was told that my shoulders were too sexy. The shoulders were not specifically, but like apparently women's shoulders are too sexy, and I needed to cover
bra
it.
straps showing.
Yeah, and I'm like, so we're dealing with this, and like sometimes I wonder, like, how are we going to get to a place where women's breasts are acceptable when like you have legislation in Idaho that's proposed that to ban yoga pants because they're too sexual, or like my shoulders are too sexy. Like, my shoulders are not sexy, they're just shoulders.
Well, I mean, it all boils down to nipples are nipples.
Yeah.
And yet for some reason, and like, another thing that comes up a lot is like with trans people, if they look female, they have to follow these rules. Even legally they're male. And I have a friend who's a trans man, and we're planning a video, someday we'll do, but I really want to go to a public pool, and he said he's okay with it. I want to see what kind of reactions we get, because legally he's male. But we're going to have people like, oh, hide your children.
Absolutely.
I know, and it's so infuriating. Just the like, we go to Ren fairs a lot, or we used to before we moved, and I would get so mad because Ren fairs are very, especially the one that we went to, is sort of a fantasy one, so the rules of costumes were pretty broad. And you got these like Vikings and barbarians or whatever, guys walking around without a shirt. A lot of the times, because we would meet twice a year, it would be hundreds of degrees. Not hundreds, but, like 110 degrees. Guys are walking around wearing a thong. Girls still have to wear shirts. And I'm just like, it's fantasy. Like, it's...
Yeah.
We could go back, we could represent a history, like, I don't know, ancient Egypt or something, where women were allowed to go. Like, I think Rome, a lot of times women would have togas where one breast would be exposed. And it's like, no, there's children... like, so
Yeah.
Or like a thing I've run into, I did a video, ironically it happened about a year or two before there was a topless protest in Venice Beach, but I went to Venice Beach and I was asking people about their attitudes, and like there was this older gentleman who I talked to who was like, oh yeah, I love the topless, I totally support it, just not in front of the children. And I was like, so you don't actually
support it,
you're still making it sexual. Alright,
I was gonna say, that segues into the question you had about,
oh okay, sorry.
No, but kids.
Yeah, that's actually what I was just going to mention.
Okay, yeah.
So just like as an intro, a lot of people, my parents and then comments and stuff like that, a lot of people are like, how can you have your child in these videos? Like, you're exploiting them, you're damaging them, or my parents' fear is that, when I was a kid, my parents actually ran afoul of CPS for some stupid BS reasons I'm not even going to get into. But they very nearly lost me to CPS, and so my mom is very nervous about that, and I've had a hard time convincing her. My attitude is basically, nowadays everyone has this kind of stuff, like, everyone has those emails that they don't want shared or whatever, and we're rapidly approaching a point where it's just not going to matter.
Yeah.
That's why, honestly, this is a total tangent, but there's been so much buildup over these alleged Trump P tapes. I think if they actually drop, people are going to be like, okay.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's going to be the big deal that he's so afraid of.
Yeah.
But anyway, so people have a lot of fear of that. And you have a child that you raised with your partner, you said?
I have a child who lives with us.
Okay.
So I have a roommate, and he has a child with a woman who does not live with us.
Okay.
And he does most of the parenting, but we kind of co-parent.
Inevitably, you're in the same house, so
Yeah.
you're going to form a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And
so she's 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, my eye is bothering me. There we go. So, yeah, I mean,
Does she know about it, or are you prepared to have a conversation with her? Like, what would you say? And also, what are your responses to people that are like, oh, you're a bad parent because you are a partner?
Well, I'd probably get really shitty with it because what my surrogate partner work does is first of all, it continually makes me a better person every day. It makes me a more thoughtful, compassionate person. It challenges me to challenge myself and the way that I think about things, and old stigmas that are just still lingering.
Yeah, nobody's perfect, and doing this kind of stuff, you always realize stuff that you didn't even realize, was a part of you. So,
so it makes me a better. We use aunt and uncle, so it makes me a better aunt to her. Like, lately we're potty training.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. We're almost out of the woods, so we just got like a few more things to work on, but. We're potty training right now, and naked phase seems to go right with potty training. So, which kind of makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Like, why? Like, I'm sure as a child, you're like, well, why do I even put on underwear if I just need to go pee all the time or poop? Like,
Why do I have this barrier?
Yeah,
I know. My little 15-month-old. Every time we're like out of the bath, if I don't like shut all the doors, he immediately runs off butt naked. I'm like, wait, I need to put a diaper so you don't poop on the floor.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like if you didn't poop and pee everywhere, and if you didn't like sit, on a place that the animals have been, I wouldn't care.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Be naked all you want.
Yeah.
We're naked all the time. So
yeah.
So it makes you a better person. And
so she's running around naked now, and she's also been touching herself both. And what's funny is there's a little bit of like, because they'll like hold their crotches when they have to pee. Like it'll like, and I say crotch because it's like generally they're like I'm holding it. So it's like a cup grab almost.
Stay in there.
And then there's a different touch, which is much more exploratory and pleasure based. And so one thing that we'll talk about is like, I'll ask her, like, are you touching your vulva? Is it because you have to go potty?
And she understands all these.
Yeah. So we use the words. And
have you read that article that's like, we don't touch our vulvas at the table?
I think I did a couple years ago. It's a little old, right?
A little old, yeah. But it's a really good one. I'm going to have to look up the link. It's basically the same thing, like, don't pretend that it doesn't exist. Don't come up with silly nicknames. Just be like, the name of the article is "We Don't Touch Our Vulvas at the Table," because it's like you're okay. You're allowed to explore, just not at the dinner table.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so we actually haven't gotten to the stage where, because we're so okay with it. So, like, she'll just go into the room and she'll be doing it, but, like, we probably need to start maybe having a conversation about, going to the bedroom and doing that. And, it's kind of something we do in privacy, and you'll be able to relax that way a little bit more, and, not worrying about us getting in your way.
I mean, it can be like, for a parallel, it can be about screaming, There's a time and a place where you're allowed to scream. When you're in the middle of a grocery store, you don't want to scream. When you're having fun in the backyard, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, you can kind of look at that as like a completely non-sexual.
Well, and what's hard for me, and it's funny that we're talking about this, because now I'm starting to think of a better way to deal with it, because what's difficult for me is I have issues with saying it's private, right? Because
private
at times
indicates shame in some ways.
It can, and also at times sexuality isn't private. Sometimes we choose it not to be, right?
Especially talking about it.
Yeah, and sometimes we want to masturbate in front of somebody else because, like, that's something, so.
Yeah, lately I've been finding out that sex clubs is a thing in Portland, which I've been talking a little bit about
I've never been to them. They're kind of expensive. That's the biggest reason I like it.
Well, I'm in the process of, like, trying a couple different ones and, like, comparing them and saying what it was like. So that's one of my upcoming video series, I guess.
I'll have to check it out. But yeah, I think the differences, and this I think is maybe a really important thing. Yes.
Yeah.
you need to give people a choice to partake in your non-private masturbation.
Right.
You know, and you're not giving me and your uncle and your dad that choice. Mm-hmm. You know, you're making that choice for us.
This could be so useful just for even adult men. It's like, you know, standing there on the street, flashing people. Those people did not give you the consent. And I mean, obviously, a lot of them do it because they want to startle people.
Exactly.
But that's a great thing, you know. Would you object to a child doing this? If so, then maybe you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
That's kind of a eureka. So.
Yeah. Well,
So my camera just ran out of battery, and I lost my backup battery at the slut walk. So again, that's part of why I'm trying to raise funds, is so I can get better equipment. Just you know, patreon.com/topless topics if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more kind of content like this. So we were talking about consent and talking to your child as being sort of a way to help her understand when is it okay to touch her vulva and stuff like that. The other part of that I'm wondering, and I mean this is a really kind of a difficult thing, but what would your argument be basically if someone was like, oh, the fact that you're talking about sex in front of a child is damaging? Is there anything you could like lead them to prove, hey, it's actually helpful?
My clients.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not explicitly, but stories. You know, we find that if we're more honest with our children and open with them, and they feel that they can talk to us about sex and sexuality, that they're more sexually healthy adults.
They're finding that with kids nowadays, is they're actually teen pregnancies and stuff like that are going way down because people are talking about this. And I mean, for me, that was something growing up that was interesting, because my parents were always very like, you want to know about sex? Okay, this is, you know, we weren't doing anything. We were just, this is what happens. And I just have all these memories, well, not all these, but several memories of when I was a kid of, you know, me being, 8 years old or something like that. Some other kid being like, do you know what sex is? I'm like, yeah. It's like, oh, okay. Like, I stole their thunder. Cause like, I just remember playing, there was this game I used to play. It was a DOS game called Lion, and part of the missions or whatever was having sex with the other lions or whatever. And it was like, you know, it was like done.
Yeah.
But I remember for me, it was really interesting. As a kid, I was always fascinated with sexuality, and so I'm very, I guess blessed is the word. I'm very lucky that my parents are not, you know, they're not like, oh, don't talk about that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that my parents are not like, my parents are actually fairly conservative compared to a lot of other people, but on the whole, they're very like, you want to know something? Okay, let's look this up. And I'm actually excited for that with my son. I mean, he's not even talking yet, so obviously we can't have too many conversations, but I'm looking forward to I'm hoping he's curious and that we can work together and find reliable sources of information. I'm not just going to be like, Google, what's the answer to this? You know, have a list of stuff, but I'm really excited for that. But yeah, so do you have any fears of running into legal trouble or?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the back of my mind.
But there's not much you can do. Just
yeah,
cross that bridge when it comes.
Yeah, and I just, you know, I try to talk to people about why I do what I do. You know, I mean, not so much with like my work, but you know, why I talk to her the way I do, and I tell her, you know, because ultimately I used to also be an educator, right? And it's having access to information can in and of itself be empowering and therapeutic. Just knowing that you can find that information, that it's not being kept from you.
Because the idea of taboo is what makes people want to do it more.
Yeah.
So
I want her to know that, you know, if she has a question, we can help her find that information. And right now, since she can't read, it's generally me telling her that, you know, but I don't want to be her gatekeeper, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to determine what things she gets to know and what things she doesn't get to know. So like
when she's older, you know, buy her an encyclopedia set, review it to make sure it's not, I mean, you just reminded me, I had this sort of a fight with a friend a while ago where, I don't want to go into detail, he doesn't watch my videos, but basically his daughter used an object in an inappropriate way, and like he pushed it off onto his girlfriend to go with her and, you know, take care of it and like talk about it. And I told him that's not, like, why are you pushing that responsibility off onto your girlfriend? First of all, it's hard on your girlfriend. Like, she's new to this relationship and she doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's telling your daughter, like, oh, don't talk to me about that kind of stuff. And I mean, that's something but this is also a friend.
And especially if the daughter decides, grows up to be heterosexual, that's going to create an interesting dynamic with her future partners.
Sure.
You know,
it's going to reinforce we don't talk about that kind of thing. So. Yeah,
I want my niece to equally be able to talk to my partner, who is a cisgender male, her dad, who is also a cisgender male, me, to my friends. You know, I have friends that are trans women, trans men. I want her to be able to feel comfortable as long as those people, you know, give her permission to ask those questions, and to, you know, so that whatever relationship she gets into as she gets older, you know, whether those are romantic or platonic, she doesn't feel like she has to
avoid certain subjects.
Yeah, because that obviously is a barrier to intimacy and connectedness. Yeah. And so,
but I mean, this friend
and our psychological health.
Yeah, but this friend is also one of the nudity is okay, but not in front of kids, and I'm just like. So obviously, since I am, you know, on my cell phone now, as fun as it's been, I'm gonna try to wrap this up a little bit. I'll just mention it since I don't want to like have a whole conversation about it. I put this online a couple of times, but I really want to start doing sort of series. And one of the things I really want to do is I want to start doing a Sexuality Sundays, where every Sunday I'm going to release an episode talking about something specifically about sexuality. So like this is a very clearly related to sexuality, but I'm going to release this as it is. I'll start that in the future. And another one is like polyamory versus swinging and stuff like that. So I want to let people know about that. So if you have questions, or, you know, if I am doing a topic and you want to know something specific to do with that topic, comment, or you can email me, toplesstopicstv@gmail.com. I don't share personal info unless you're an asshole to me. And I mean, even then, I'm not really sharing anything. It's just like if someone leaves a YouTube comment where they're like really insulting, sometimes I'll take a screenshot, I'll put it on. So, you know, I swear to you up and down, if it's like an embarrassing question and you don't want me to put your info in there, I won't. So I want to start doing stuff like that because, again, I really want to help people see the difference between I'm a woman, therefore I'm a sex object, versus I'm a woman and I'm choosing at this moment to be a sex object. And so that's very important. And also I wanted to make sure that we gave you a platform to talk about all your projects. So you have a podcast that you just recently started, right?
Yes.
And what is it called? How many episodes do you have? What kind of stuff do you talk about, and where can they find it?
Okay.
Really fast now.
Yeah. It's called The Sexual Philosopher. Thank you. I will be syndicating it, so it should be, I actually haven't released it yet.
Okay. So you're doing this very by the book then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to get about 8 episodes because it's really, I interview people, so it's really challenging to get them to, you know, just time and things like that.
Thank you for being so, not eager, but so willing to work with me on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to start doing this, but I'm like, I've never done it before, so I don't know like what to say. But you're a great. I mean, obviously your job is related, but you're a great person to start getting into interviews with. But anyway, sorry.
No problem. So the idea really came out of a desire to explore human sexuality through personal narratives. I felt like that was an area of podcasts around sexuality that's missing. There's a lot of kink and BDSM stuff, and I'm so happy that's there.
Kind of almost not in an insulting way, but clickbait stuff.
Yeah,
people are like more likely to click.
And I'm super like, that is awesome, and I listen to almost all of those, you know. So there is no knocking that.
Yeah, and to combat the misinformation.
Yes.
So that's
but given my work, that's what influenced it a lot, and the book, The Erotic Mind.
Okay.
I really wanted to do a little more of a back to basics, you know, psychosexuality podcast, where we talk about, you know, how the construction of your sexuality. So
what kind of guests are you talking to?
Mostly friends right now, but I'm discovering that my friends are incredibly diverse, like even more than I realized. I mean, I knew they were pretty diverse. I've talked to a friend of mine who's a trans woman. I've talked to, I'm actually meeting up with another trans woman tonight who is doing she does burlesque.
Okay.
A friend of mine, I asked them to talk to me, and they requested a meeting with me, only to discover that, to tell me that they are asexual. Okay. So we'll be talking about asexuality.
So you didn't know that until...
I did not know that. No.
Okay.
It was not something... They're a pretty private person.
Okay. Well, good on them for agreeing to a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this all audio?
Yes, it will all be audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I would like to do that, but I'm kind of worried that, like, most people wouldn't listen because they come for the tits.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Well, and also I think it makes sense for you to do that, because...
I'm normalizing...
Why hide behind audio?
Right.
Right, if what you really are trying to do is normalize bodies.
Then, of course, the flip side is like, people are like, oh, free the pussy, and I'm just like, just go away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the thing you end up dealing with.
But I mean, mentioning anything to do with sex at all, you're going to have that happen. Yeah, so absolutely. You're talking to friends just, because you know them and you want to get them on. Mm-hmm. What are some of your, because this is something for me too, like I love that I'm talking to you and you have a lot to say, but I have like a wish list of kind of what I'm trying to get towards, to have the resources and have the, examples of kind of videos I've done to talk to other people. Like one that you probably haven't heard of, but a lot of other people are going to know, is Anita Sarkeesian, who started... I know. Oh, you've heard of her? Yeah. Okay, yeah. And I mean, she's a very divisive figure, but I feel like she has so much to say in regards to, misogyny and stuff like that. So she's like one of my goals. So what are some figures that you really want to maybe someday interview?
Elle Stanger is one of them. I was on her podcast, which is actually how I got access to Slutwalk. So I do want to ask her to come on. Okay.
And what is her experience, just so people know?
Yeah, so she's a stripper, an activist, and an author, and she does a lot of her author work is around, it's around parenting and being a stripper, and then sexuality. Mm-hmm. And she has just recently attended a sex educator training, so I know she is transitioning to being a sex educator also. So she has kind of, her credentials are all over the place, which is awesome.
It kind of blew my mind when she said, I think she said it when she was at the Slut Walk, she's actually a year younger than me. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's done so many things.
Yeah, she's not very old. Yeah, I think I'm like 7 years older than her or something. Yeah.
But
so I was like, damn, you've done a lot. And she actually has a podcast too, which I mentioned, Unzip PDX, which I highly recommend. So I really want to interview her.
Any national figures or anything like that?
I would love to interview...
I want to interview Clinton. Deal with it.
That would be fascinating. Oh my goodness. Hillary, right? Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, she's a fascinating character.
No offense to Bill, but no.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't either. No. But
it's kind of funny that you have to clarify that, because for me, I'm just like, Clinton, Hillary.
Well, I assumed, but then I was like, I better make sure I'm
10 years ago, it would have been, Bill. And it's like, no, it's Hillary.
Yeah.
I'm going to get so much hate just for that. Bring it on. But yeah, so anyone
Tina Horn of Why Are People Into That? She actually she hasn't ever been able to fully admit it, but she hints at having been an escort in the past. So I would love to talk to her. Mm-hmm. And she does workshops all over the place. And so she's just incredible. Sandra Doherty of Sex Nerd Sandra, I would love to interview her for a podcast. Those would be some more aspirational folks. I mean, like big dreams.
I already said Clinton, so
that's kind of like I would love to interview some of the more like feminist politicians, or Jesus Christ, would it be amazing to I lived in Florida when Charlie Crist was running for governor at the time, and he lost. But there's actually a lot of speculation. There's a great movie on Netflix called Outraged.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, that basically shows the link between closeted gay male politicians and their policies, the way that they vote, and the policies that they back that are anti-LGBT.
All this deflection and everything, yeah.
Charlie Crist was on there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
it's a documentary kind of thing?
Yes,
okay.
It is. So, like, how fascinating would it be to sit there and ask him these questions and together,
do you
like...
think he'd be forthcoming at all, though? I mean...
Maybe when he retires. That's why I'm saying big dreams.
Give him some true serum. Get him drunk. You know.
I'm intrigued by these people who are like complete tyrants and like I want to know their sexuality and get in there and because I think there's a lot to be explored.
Yeah.
So
well, like that's another thing that I wouldn't say is necessarily a dream of mine. Maybe someday when I feel more prepared and more brave, I do want to actually start taking on counterpoints. And I mean, that's part of why I think Anita is so strong, is she takes this kind of criticism head on. Whereas I'm like, you know, like I'll read it on the comments after the fact. But
yeah,
like,
me too.
the idea of doing a podcast with, you know, the guy that followed me around at the March for Truth, or doing, you know, Sargon of Akkad or Baked Alaska or any of these, call them what you will, like that terrifies me. But I know that it would be important. But at the same time, probably all their fans would come and just be like, feminazi. But anyway, and so when do you think your podcast will be available then?
I'm hoping to release it next week, so probably around the 15th.
Okay, because I thought you were going to get all 8 episodes done first.
Yeah, I'm almost there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you'd only done like 1 or 2.
Yeah, no.
That's awesome. And where will it be available?
Should be available on Apple iTunes, Podcast Addict. I'm hoping,
Okay.
Yeah, I've got to look into. I'm actually after this going to look into the syndication.
Okay.
So, but yeah, my hope is to get it on Spotify, anything that you used, Stitcher, so that you can access it anywhere. Yeah,
because I mean, there's a lot of interesting podcasts out there, but a lot of them aren't available on Spotify or whatever. So I can only listen to it if I'm at my computer, and it's very limiting.
Like SoundCloud.
Yeah, so
it bums me out, and there's a lot of them on SoundCloud that you're just like.
Plus, there's such a sea of them that it's like, which one do I listen to? But I mean, that's something that's so exciting about nowadays is podcasts, because, you know, I'm a very artistic person, and it's awesome to be able to put a podcast on and work on my painting or whatever.
Yes.
So, well, I'm sure you will send me links.
Yes.
When it's up, I will put them in the description. I am hoping to do another video maybe a couple weeks or a couple months from now after you've had it up for a while, and maybe you can talk more about the podcast and what that's been like.
Yeah.
And is there any other is there any other source of reference or speaker you want to encourage people to look at besides all the ones that we've already mentioned?
As far as so you want
just either specifically about surrogate partner. I know we like totally got away from that. Either specifically about like how to find or how to become a surrogate partner, or just feminism or anything basically, sexuality.
Check out Feministing.
Okay.
They're incredible.
Is that a podcast?
It is a news outlet.
Okay.
And they actually have
like the Mary Sue kind of.
What's that? Oh, I don't know the Mary Sue.
Oh, okay. I think it's more like nerd centric, but basically it's like talking about feminism and stuff like that in comic books and movies and stuff like that.
Okay. So. Yeah, they've got a lot of different areas. So they've like analyzed like pop culture. Okay. They've got explicit, like they've got news, but they do actually have a woman who does a sex column too, and like it's feminist like sex positivity. So I would definitely check Feministing out.
All right.
These guys are local, Black Girl Dangerous. They are incredible. Check them out. They do have a podcast. It's BGD Podcast. But if you just type in Black Girl Dangerous, you can also read all of their articles. They do incredible work with breaking down white supremacy and patriarchy all together and how they kind of intermix.
Would you say it's a little accessible for people that are just now starting to open themselves to reading about that, or is it fairly, like, for lack of a better word, aggressive? Because the thing is, like, I want
it's accessible. I think it's very academic and very well, and that's same with Feministing. It's very
Okay.
It's very accessible. There's a lot of narrative in it too, so you can really start to develop compassion and understanding for like what Black women experience and things like that.
Yeah, because I really want to expand my repertoire of resources to give to people who are just starting to come around to the idea of recognizing privilege. Because as you're obviously familiar, there's a lot of people that are like, they're automatically resistant to it. And so, you know, in the resources that I want to recommend, unfortunately, if it's too, people are like, and they close down.
So that completely reminds me. I have been pushing this podcast on everyone that I know. So the podcast name is Scene on Radio, SCENE on radio. But they did a series of 14 podcasts. It's the last 14 that you'll see on there. Like kind of a mini series.
I'm just trying to figure out how they came up with that name.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, I'm really curious. I know they're affiliated with NPR, and I'm like, that just sounds like such an NPR name. But it's called Seeing White.
Okay.
I actually want my parents, I want to introduce it to my parents. It is basically, it is so amazing. It's a 14-part series, like I said, breaking down basically how white supremacy is an incredibly, it was an intentional and uniquely American phenomenon. Like, yeah, I mean, there's some information out there that like, I mean, I consider myself pretty well read in this area, and I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So, and it has imbued, it has completely changed the landscape of my life.
Wow.
Like, and the way that I look at things and think about things. So especially with accessibility, and it's put on by a white guy. Now he consults with an African-American professor at the end and throughout. I think it depends, but he talks to Chenjerai Kumanyika almost every.
How do you say it name?
Chenjerai Kumanyika.
I love how you just like,
yeah. I've
so
heard
easy.
it. I've heard it so many times now.
I'd be like.
Yeah, I can't even actually remember the host of the podcast, but I remember Chenjerai Kumanyika's name. So he processes all of this stuff that he's learning with Chenjerai. Okay. But you know, it's put on a white guy, so if you're white, you're gonna feel, you know, it's
you get your hand held a little bit.
Yeah, but you know, very based in fact, a lot of facts that we don't know, a lot of history. I'm trying to get my parents to listen to it because they're pushing back a little bit on privilege, and like I really this is the thing that's going to change their minds.
I'm going to try it with my parents too, because it's like we, you know, my dad and I, and sometimes my mom, we have these very like, you know, interesting conversations, especially like, you know, I'll watch a bunch of clips I'll watch a bunch of clips of Daily Show, and then or I'll play it and we'll all watch it together, and then we'll discuss like what they're talking about. And again, like in some ways my parents are very liberal, but in other ways they're very conservative, and my mom really doesn't understand white privilege, and she just really not resents it, but she resists it. She resists acknowledging it. And so that sounds, I'm real excited. I'm gonna check that out and get them to watch it. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much. This was kind of a learning experience a little bit. I mean, it's not like the first time I've not the first time I've done an interview, but it's definitely the first time I've done an interview with someone I didn't already know. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we'll talk in the future about finding out more about your podcast. As I keep telling people, I'm trying to get the money together to do a website, and one of the things I really want to do on the website, I'm going to do on the website, is have a lot of written pieces too. And like my dad writes this series called The Naked Chronicles, which is basically about different stuff in history and everything like that of different nudist locations. And I'm also, like, you're telling me about these other websites and everything, and you just gave me the idea of, I wonder if I could contact some of them and maybe get their permission to kind of repost some of their stuff to get people to go read it, because what I'm always hoping with these videos is that I can sort of, for lack of a better term, trick people into learning. And so it's like, and I actually get people that tell me this, like they're like, oh, I came because it said Topless, but then I started listening and I actually like learned all this stuff. And when they tell me that, it's like, yes, that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing it to normalize non-sexual toplessness, and I'm also doing it to kind of get people to look at stuff that they wouldn't otherwise look at. And again, you know, I'm not saying this condescendingly, because I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly, I mean, this is sort of SJW lingo, but I'm constantly learning to check my own privilege. And, you know, for so long, a lot of what I faced is on the victim side, or whatever you want to call it, of being female. But then it's like, turns out if you're black, or if you're a woman and you're black, you have way more shit to deal with. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't even think of that as being a problem, but now I understand. And in that sense, it also kind of gives me empathy, sort of, for guys that, like, for instance, are like, oh, why does toplessness matter? Why does it matter? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you don't ever think about it.
The more you're privileged, like, the more privilege you have, the more invisible it is.
Yeah, or the phrase,
so
you know.
You do have to kind of understand, like, you know, my dad's going to have a harder time seeing it than even I was, because I had a point of entry with being a woman, you know.
Yeah.
So. And
the quote, however it goes, it's something about, like, the more privileged you are, the more equality feels like oppression, I think is the phrase, which, you know, again, like, a lot of people, they resist it because it feels condescending, and that's why I'm trying to emphasize, you know, it's a learning experience for me too. So I'm sorry if I give the impression that I'm, like, condescending. Okay, I could just keep talking forever.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep doing this.
It's because you're so fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, look in the description for links for everything. If you have questions that you want Carlene to answer in a future thing, let me know. You know, I'm getting more organized about this. I'm, like, coming up with, like, actual lists so that I'm prepared. And good luck with your podcast, and I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye.